It's an interesting journey from the perspective of just where I was and where I've come from and where I'm going. Basically, around the age of 13, started getting into some bad stuff. You know, my parents were around. We did church stuff. We were part of youth groups, but really no mention of Christ in those days. And so I started rebelling at the age of 13, started drinking, smoking pot there soon after. And that progressed very rapidly into an addiction. By the time, I'm not sure what age that was, but going to parties, drinking, and probably almost smoking pot every day for quite some time. And during that time, started working at Long John Silver's, and was up in the west end of Dayton. And I was robbed once. And that was a thrilling moment, believe it or not. And the second time I was robbed, I was like, this isn't good for me. And so I was getting ready to leave, and I said, I'm going to school. And they said, well, no, we'll make you the manager down in Springboro. And that's when there was a significant change, in the sense that I went down there and met all the staff. And as I was meeting the staff, they said, well, you haven't met this one guy yet, and he's a little strange. And his name is Todd Ellsworth, and he's a high schooler, and he carries his Bible to work. And just meeting Todd and knowing and understand, just getting to know him and asking him things every day, like, hey, Todd, give me a word for the day. And he'd tell me something, and one day he said, hey, Marty, you know what? I was saved while I was driving my car. I probably didn't have a clue what that really meant at the time. But Todd and I stayed, we were in constant communication. He worked for me. And so, yeah, Todd, 16, 17, I'm 20. Not an outgoing guy, but very willing to share with me. And oftentimes I'd, like I said, ask him, tell me something, and he would. And so that was the beginning of understanding kind of where I needed to get. During that time also, I was dating a girl from the restaurant, and thought I was in love, and it was one of those relationships that it was mainly built on lust, essentially, and so she ended up breaking up with me, and so that was a heartbreak, and really started struggling more, probably smoking pot a little bit more, drinking a little bit more, but also at the same time, I'm starting to do a little searching, because one of the things Todd told me, he said, just read the Bible, Marty, and starting, I probably said starting John, and I did, and so, as I'm reading the Bible one day, as I was living with a buddy of mine, and so I'd have the Bible out one day, and the next day I'd have my bong out, and that's literally how it was. And I would hide the Bible behind my bed because I didn't really want Chris to know what was going on. And so as I'm reading, and Tracy broke up with me, and I start looking for love, and I actually start keeping a journal, and I said, well, what is love? What is this thing called love? And I'm reading, and I get to 1 John 4:8, and it says, God is love. It was a light bulb. And so from that moment, I continued to search the scriptures and read, and was convicted. I'd be partying one day and just throwing up puking because I got so wasted, crying out to God the next day, God, what's going on? And so that went on for 2 months. I remember that very distinctly. There was a huge spiritual battle happening between Satan and God. One of the things I said I would never do is I said I'd never do a hit of acid. So we were having a Halloween party, and one of the guys brought some acid, and I dropped two hits of it, and I liked it. And that really was a turning point for me because it scared me because I liked it. And that was a turning point, really. So I'm continuing to read, and then during the same time, one of the people I used to go see at Kennedy's at the deli was Cindy Stanley. I'd go talk to Cindy, and Cindy'd always say, "Hey, this girl's not good enough for you, and I'll fix you up with somebody." Well, unbeknownst to me, Sarah was not unbeknownst to me, but Sarah was working with Cindy as well. So I'd say hi to Sarah, and and so forth. And then Cindy said, "Hey, why don't we all three go out?" And I said, "Sure thing," And then Cindy conveniently drops out, and so it was just Sarah and I. And Sarah was fine with it. I think we talked, and so it was October 29th is when we were going to go out. I was in the Air National Guard, so I was on my way back from the Guard, and I had my Bible out on my steering wheel, and I didn't know it'd be this hard.
Yeah.
Or good,
Yeah, it's good. Good stuff.
I'm driving with the Bible on my steering wheel, and I said, "God, I'm tired of fighting you. I'm yours." That instant, after 7-8 years of addiction, the desire to drink was gone. The desire to smoke pot was gone. My language changed. My demeanor changed. That instant. So fast forward 2 hours later, and I'm getting ready to take Sarah out, and and I still remember this day too. We're seeing her, waiting for, I go up to the door, and there she, she's got a puffy vest on and jeans and I think a plaid shirt, and we're going to haunted houses. This is our first date, and I said, and I was already so we went to 2 haunted houses. I told Sarah, I said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't go to these haunted houses." And she's like, and I said, "Can we go talk?" And she said, "Sure." And we went to Shawnee Park, and we talked, and I started telling Sarah what was going on in my life, and she just was shocked. Her jaw was just like, "What's going on here?" Because she had no idea. She knew I was in a bad place. She thought it was going to be a dating out. And so that's why I say I met my 2 loves in one day. So Sarah and I have been dating 35 years, and I've been saved for 35 years. So yeah. Probably the weekend after the next weekend I started going to church at Emmanuel. One of the more influential men in my life would be Pastor Wheeler. He took me under his wing. He's my spiritual father. And it really had an impact on me. So right away, what he said, "Marty, you need to get together with some guys." And another big impact, it was Mike Mikesell, Tom Grotehouse, Jonathan Bowersox, and Chuck Shepard. They were getting together on Wednesdays to pray. And so I started joining them. And I think Pastor Wheeler had it was the wisdom he had to set me up with guys that were my age and already in a spiritual, they were spiritually mature. And so that was a big impact. One of the guys, I'll never forget this, his name is David Hildebrandt. And what he told me after we were in the hallway, when the auditorium was upstairs, he says, "Marty, don't look back. Just don't look back." And that was another key, just those words. So I grew over time. Sarah and I got married. So we dated. Sarah and I dated 4 years. I had 2 years of school left. She had graduated already, so we got married. And that was a blessing in itself. Sarah's just been great. Couldn't ask for a better wife. Huge support and huge, just fun to be with. We love being together. We love spending time together, and we still laugh together. We still have our adventures together. But during that, so soon after that, I went to a Promise Keepers conference, and that was probably a turning point for me spiritually as well. I think it was 91. And God just kind of grabbed hold of me. I was probably doing all right, but he just kind of grabbed a hold of me and said, "What are you doing?" And I remember specifically some really deep prayers with that, and not letting the high of the Promise Keepers movement leave and continue to go down a path that I feel that I know God has just led me through. One of the verses there and I claimed is Hebrews 12:1 and 2. You know, we're running a race and people are watching us, and we just got to finish hard, and that's what we've been claiming. So from and then continued recently, and I've shared with you, Greg, God's just continued to prod, and really it's been neat to see how He's continuing to work after 35 years. As Mike and I were reading Gripped by the Greatness of God, it started talking about holiness and really just started penetrating my heart. And I had been emailing or texting a couple guys, and I realized that some of these things in my life I just needed to share. I needed to share that God is prodding, and He continues to prod, and just understanding, not even understanding the holiness as a whole, but just being pushed and pulled and saying, okay, Marty, what are you doing with this? And through books like that, and right now even with the counterculture and what are we doing with life, it just kind of made me think, what am I doing with life? And I think you recently said, Greg, that you were just trying to get to a different level in your spiritual life. And really that was one of those moments as well. It's like, okay, what am I doing? And then I started reading the book, and then Mike and I were talking. It's like, well, how am I encouraging other men? And that's where I really feel that sometimes we miss out. We don't share our stories. We don't share what's God, how is God pressing on me? How is God pressing me on me right now? And even in the book I'm reading about poverty, and what am I doing with it? Or what am I doing with His holiness or His awesomeness? God's awesomeness, or so that's really what started pushing me to say, okay, where am I at? I've been in bad places in the sense of when I turned 40, it was a year of funk, but God, I pressed through it. I pressed through it in the sense that music's been a big impact with me, and so there's a couple songs that kind of just I hung on to, and so as I continue to grow. Books, people, the Bible, I'm just drawn in more, and it's interesting, and I see God just moving more. I see me being more willing to share my faith. There's probably not a week that I go by that I don't share some portion of my faith with somebody, whether it's just because I don't drink. That's been a great avenue because so many people drink and I don't, and they ask why, or it's just a conversation, and I'm very bold with my testimony, and God's just blessed me with that, and sometimes you get good responses, and sometimes they say, hey, that's good for you, Marty. Yeah, that's nice.